Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, rollin'. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters. And it's August 26th, straight up 12 noon. Welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters. We are brought to you by the workcompcentral.com. If you want the number one location for workers' compensation in both California and around the United States, check out the workcompcentral.com. They've got a free 7-day offer. And if you want to pick up their services, I have them. You should too, damn it. It's only $1 a day. Work Comp Matters is also brought to you by A1 Law. Number one computer management system used by more workers' compensation attorneys than any other system on the planet. 818-357-4120 for your no strings attached money back guarantee. Also only $1 a day. A1 Law. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Appell. I'm joined by the madman across the water, Mr. John Scalia, and my chief of staff, the doctor, but he's not a medical doctor, Mr. Mike Zyma. We are joined today by my special guest, Ms. Karen Anderson, who heads up the Freelancers Against AB5. Now, let me just set this up really quickly, and then we'll have Karen come in and say hello. I saw Karen interviewed on another podcast, and I said to myself, I got to get her in. And so I reached out to her. I tried to get her. She didn't respond for a while, and then she eventually responded and said, "Hey, Steve, love to be on the show. I just had to check you out first," which I understand, because as I've said before, we've rolled out the red carpet for the California Labor Commissioner to come on ever since they announced that they were representing hundreds of thousands of gig economy Uber and Lyft drivers to make them employees. And then once that happened, I communicated back and forth, text, email, telephone. I don't think I did a telephone call, but whatever, all types of communication, speaking with the reps. And the labor commissioner and or her representative refused to come on the show unless I provided the questions in advance. And Steve Appell does not provide questions in advance. Well, my guest did not ask me for the questions in advance. As always, right before the show, pre-interview, is there anything you do want to talk about? Is there anything you don't want to talk about? And I am a man of my word, and I respect that. So at this time, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Ms. Karen Anderson. Thanks for coming on the show, Karen. How are you?
I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is mine. I don't know if there's a technical issue there. It sounds a little delayed, but we'll just keep going. So before we start out talking about AB5, I got to ask you, how did you check me out? And what did you think? Did you have you or your people do it? Or what was involved in your research in checking out Steve Appell and Work Comp Matters?
I listened to your podcast from last week and I enjoyed it profusely. And I thought it would be a really great...
Profusely,
yes.
So I kind of sound like I know what I'm talking about. I know at least when it comes to AB5, I've been following AB5 since it was proposed last year and approved by the legislature. And I have been, I make no beans about it. I totally understand that it is in the state of California's interest to classify as many people as that are independent contractors as employees as possible, because the state gets tax dollars. Additionally, the employees are protected. They get workers' compensation insurance, arguably general liability, whatever the case may be. But I am against AB5 because in my mind, I think the Dynamex case 2 years ago basically did enough. I don't think we need AB5. And in fact, and I've said this before, I think the real purpose of AB5 is to exempt certain employees to exempt certain independent contractors from being employees. I don't really think the sole purpose is to make all independent contractors employees, because really Dynamex did that already 2 years ago. What is your take? Take a few minutes and tell us your thoughts and opinions on AB5.
Well, the Dynamics ruling in 2018 by the California Supreme Court was a ruling on wage orders. And so AB5 supposedly codified that ruling, but expanded it beyond the wage orders to ensnare every kind of, independent contracting model out there. And so right off the top, as you said, they exempted certain categories of professions that had a lot of influence: doctors, lawyers, accountants, dentists, veterinarians, etc. And now they're doing more and more carve-outs for various select few professions, but it's a complete mess. And I think that their intention is to have as many people as possible converted into employees for exactly the reason you stated. They would like the state would like to collect all of those payroll taxes, regular taxes, benefits, unemployment insurance, and of course the massive fines that they can incur for going after any business, large or small, for misclassifying an independent contractor. And the fines range between $5,000 to $25,000 per violation. So they can really recoup a lot of money into the state coffers via AB5. And AB5 empowers a whole posse of government prosecutors to come after any business, large or small, they suspect of misclassifying. And that would include the labor commissioners, now empowered by AB5, district attorneys in any town that has a district attorney, of course, city attorneys in San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles, and also the Attorney General of the state of California.
Now, recently, in the past couple of years, the misclassification or the alleged misclassification of independent contractors to employees has been taken up by a lot of workers' compensation insurance carriers. 10 years ago, and Mike and John, you guys can comment on this, yes, no, or later, but I don't recall 10 years ago seeing so many audits by workers' compensation insurance carriers that are going in, they're auditing an employer's books to find out who they classify as independent contractors and employees. Of course, they're finding, in their opinion, that a lot of the independent contractors they believe are classified as employees, and they're issuing retro premiums going back however many years, and it is driving people out of business. Do you have a take or any thoughts about workers' compensation insurance companies auditing employers and then assessing a 6 or 7 figure fee for retro premium?
Is that for me?
Yeah, for you, Karen.
Well, the details of workers' comp is a little over my head, but I know that they gave a reprieve, a 6-month reprieve in AB5 for businesses to provide workers' comp insurance to the independent contractors that they have converted into employees. So on July 1st, that kicked in. And I've been told that because of AB5, it could certainly embolden the Bureau of Field Enforcement and California Department of Industrial Relations oversight and lead to industry sweeps that are more frequent and broader in scope. And also due to AB5, you have to include these tougher employee classes in workers' comp policies that are not designed to accommodate them. So there's going to be, like, I was told, I'm reading this, I'm no expert, but the short rate penalty for early cancellations are pretty severe, and then they have to reshop their policies and cover independent contractors for workers' comp that they use to 10-9. They have to provide workers' comp for these new classes of employees that they have to convert, that they used to have the luxury of being able to 1099. So, is that correct?
Well, we'll find out. We'll give John and Mike a chance to briefly comment before the news. My special guest is Karen Anderson of Freelancers Against AB5. We're having obviously a little bit of technical issues, but this is a live podcast. We don't stop. We don't edit. We just go. After we have the news break, Karen, I want to ask you specifically about the gig economy and AB5. But before we get to that really quickly, we've got a few minutes before the news break. My little Facebook group has about 1,200 people. Your Freelancers Against AB5 has over 18,000 members. When did Freelancers Against AB5 start? And how did you grow it so exponentially?
Well, I'm just a regular average person that started a Facebook group after, I read about the law after it was signed, and I researched it and found out that it, entrapped so many different categories of professions. So I wanted to reach out to see if I could hear stories about how AB5 impacts all these other professions, everybody from musicians to translators and interpreters to writers, journalists, professional Santa Clauses, you name it.
And by the way, Scott Walton of Legendary Uncle Studios has talked to us off air, because Scott doesn't like to come on the air, but that's okay. He's talked to us about musicians in AB5, but take another minute and please continue.
Yeah, it was a complete mess. So right around December, so I started to see an increase in my group, because people were already getting terminated by their clients before the law even went into effect on January 1st, 2020. So people were losing their careers and livelihoods overnight before the law was even signed. And then when January hit, it was just an incredible amount of stories coming in daily from all sectors of professions and industries and trades, and just average people, stay-at-home moms, seniors, people who are disabled who work from home, people in the healthcare, the community theaters. One of the big things we were hearing about in the beginning were all the opera companies and community theaters closing their doors and shutting down because they weren't able to comply with AB5. It was just too costly to convert all these one-offs into employees, and it was increasing the cost of production by cost of a single production by $40,000, which is prohibitive for a little community playhouse that's putting on a children's production. And so it was just ravaging and incinerating people's careers, professionals, pharmacists, career professionals, not just, these low wage workers that the law is touting to protect. People with degrees, people that make six figures. Entire industries are being decimated. The independent filmmaking industry, we're hearing a lot of stories about how it's just really imperiling the whole industry in California. Franchises, there's 78,000 franchises in California, and that franchising model is being impacted by AB5. Festivals were shutting down long before COVID. This was happening before COVID. There's absolutely no COVID is not an excuse for some of these lost livelihoods at all. It was happening before it ever was a factor. And then with COVID hitting, it's kind of a double whammy. So I've been busy compiling all these stories that people share, just horrible stories about the cruelty of this law, how it's impacting average Californians. And I created an archive of professions. So I have collected over 200 categories of professions, and within each of those categories are stories that people are sharing about how their careers and their livelihoods were basically taken from them overnight by this onerous draconian law.
My name is Steve Appell. You're dialed into Work Comp Matters. We're brought to you by theworkcompcentral.com and A1 Law. My special guest today is Karen Anderson of the Freelancers against AB5. Mike and John, I think you guys are going to have a choice. If you want, you could either do a few minutes of news, but my suggestion would be if you've got that special question or two for Karen, now would be the time to ask. And the information is so profound, we might just have to skip the news. But John, I'll go to you first. What do you want to do, bud?
Well, Karen, I'll ask some questions. My understanding is that in LA, the SAG has an agreement with local theater groups, groups that present plays and musicals. And if they're under 100 seats, they don't have to pay union scale. So do you have any actual concrete examples of any theater group that went out of business because of the proposed AB5?
Well, I have lots of examples. The Christian Youth Theater in San Diego, for example, is a very well-known youth community arts program that launches careers of major stars. And he came and joined our group, and he told us he can't comply with AB5. The Sierra Madre Playhouse in Los Angeles had to cancel their annual children's Charlotte's Web production because they valiantly tried to comply with AB5, but they couldn't. It would increase the cost of their production by $38,000, a single production. They couldn't do it. There's festivals that are already leaving. The San Jose Jazz Festival, the Lake Tahoe Music Festival, they already shut down because of AB5. This is long before COVID hit. Opera companies, we have so many different opera directors that have come into my group and told us that they spent $10,000. One gal spent $10,000 to try to save her summer opera series, and they couldn't do it, and so she's going to probably I think she is shutting down her doors. And as far as this musician's exemption, it isn't in effect yet. It still has to be signed into law. It hasn't passed the Senate yet, and it still has to be signed by Governor Newsom, but it only exempts a segment of musicians, and those musicians are gigging musicians. If you're a musician that plays in an orchestra pit, or you're playing for community playhouse for a ballet or something like that, that production or that playhouse has to convert you into a W-2.
Well, my question actually was whether or not you had an example of somebody. You started with the Christian Youth Group. Can you tell me what was it about AB5 that would have applied to them that stopped them? Because I assume they're associated with the church, and churches notoriously pay nothing in taxes. So what is it about the Christian Youth Group couldn't comply with that caused them to stop their production number?
Well, I'd have to look up the details of his story, but there's another group, Opera Pacific Project.
Okay, hold on. Okay, unfortunately, we're having some technical difficulties with. Okay. I think it's with the Zoom. John, I understand, but when the two of you are talking over, it makes it difficult for radio podcasting. So, John, thank you for that. Mike Zyma, do you have that special question for Karen Anderson of Freelancers against AB5?
Thanks, Steve. Karen, do you think AB5 is the result of lawmakers trying to help folks, or is it just lawmakers grabbing for money and being social engineering bureaucrats?
the second thing that you said.
I had a feeling you were going to say that, Karen. But go ahead if you
Lawmakers,
want to follow.
this whole thing about protecting workers, I feel, it's just my personal opinion, is a ruse. This is a money grab. This is all about unions. AB 5 was written by union type big labor people and passed on to Lorena Gonzalez, who's an assemblywoman in a small district in San Diego, who has been a career union organizer and is now a legislator. And it is backed and pushed by unions. And so, and also, when she, at the very first hearing in April for AB 5, April of last year, it's hard to believe it's only been since then. The first words out of the gate with her was the $7 billion that she says that California loses because of quote unquote misclassification. So this is about the state wanting to squash the trajectory of the independent workforce that has been slowly overtaking the traditional workforce, and I think the figure is like by 3%. So they don't want the independent workforce to get out of control because they need those payroll taxes and everything else. And I can understand some of the concern. I can understand that, but AB 5 is like a giant tuna net, and all of these people are the dolphins and turtles that are trapped in the net and the decimation of lives and livelihoods and careers and businesses in California is epic.
That is a great analogy, Karen. I've never heard that one before. My name is Steve Appell. You're dialed into Work Comp Matters. We're brought to you by workcompcentral.com and A1 Law. My special guest is Karen Anderson of Freelancers against AB 5. We've got about 7 minutes left, Karen. Obviously, what's of interest to most Californians is the gig economy, and more specifically, Uber and Lyft. I see this, unfortunately, coming down to an either-or mentality, black or white. Either they're employees or they're independent contractors with no wiggle room in between. We had attorney Ann Bobchick come on the show, who agreed with me that there has to be some middle ground between the two. What is your take? Does it have to be completely one way or the other? Or if you were in charge, if you were Governor Newsom, what would you propose?
Well, if I were Governor Newsom, I would repeal AB 5, or at the very least suspend it during a pandemic so people can work. Secondly, in regards to the gig economy, Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash, if there's problems with that specific industry's business model, then address them specifically and don't entrap every single other person that's trying to just make a living in this state. As far as Proposition 22 goes, according to Uber and Lyft, they are providing, I don't have the details in front of me about what benefits they're now offering, but they are presenting it to the voters, and the voters will decide if Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, basically rideshare and app-based delivery can be exempt from AB 5. Prop 22 is not a repeal AB 5.
It is not. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Please tell me what is Prop 22 then? Because I thought it was a repeal of AB 5.
No, then this is where everybody's confused.
Including yours truly, but go ahead.
Prop 22 is merely a single industry act asking voters to decide if they can be exempt from AB 5. It has nothing to do with repealing AB 5 in its entirety or any portion of AB 5. It has to do with exempting rideshare and app-based delivery from AB 5.
And that's probably that way because it was mainly sponsored, like you said, by DoorDash, Lyft, and Uber. What would you do if the decision were yours? If Karen Anderson could decide how to deal with the issues, because there are clearly issues with the gig economy and specifically Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash. How would you resolve the issue where everybody could be happy? Or is that even possible?
I think you have to look at who the drivers.
Come on here, and I was going to ask you easy questions.
Who are what do the drivers want? Most of them are driving part-time or maybe under 5 hours a week, if that. 70. We've seen surveys that 70 up to 75% of them want to remain independent contractors, so they can have the flexibility and the independence, and they can turn the app off and on whenever they want. So the whole point of it is, but I understand also that there's problems within their business model. So I don't know. It's a complicated situation. You could ask Kamala Harris's brother-in-law. He is the chief legal officer for Uber. You could ask Valerie Jarrett.
But what's Kamala Harris's brother-in-law's name, please?
Tony West. He is the chief legal officer for Uber. And he also was in the Obama administration as a senior advisor, and he was a third in line at the Department of Justice under Eric Holder. He is the chief legal officer for Uber. We should be asking him what he thinks. We should also ask Valerie Jarrett. Valerie Jarrett was the senior White House advisor for 8 years with the Obama administration, and she is the director of the board of directors of Lyft. Go and ask her. She will tell you. In fact, she wrote a letter to the Lyft drivers just last week about how they're looking out for their independent contractors. You can ask the NAACP. You can ask the Black Chamber of Commerce what they think. They are in favor of Proposition 22 because converting people to employees will adversely impact minority communities. Same with the Small Black Business Association.
We've got about 2 minutes. Yeah, we've got about 2 minutes left. What is next on the horizon up until the election in November for Karen Anderson and Freelancers against AB5? Take a minute or two, and then unfortunately, I got to close the show.
Well, we're continuing to educate the public, and our biggest hurdle is lack of awareness about what AB5 is and who it impacts in California. Most Californians don't know the basics about AB5. They think it's just about Uber and Lyft. So it's our job, my job, the members of our page, to educate their friends and neighbors about AB5. And then they can decide how they want to vote on Prop 22. I'm going to be voting yes on Prop 22 because anything that can drive a stake in the heart of AB5, or at least amputate its limbs and stop this from metastasizing, is fine by me.
Driving a stake through the heart, amputating limbs, preventing it from metastasizing. You've got some great analogies, I got to tell you. Karen Anderson of Freelancers Against AB5, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully you'll come on again maybe one time before the election. I would love to have you again. Thank you so much.
Well, there's a lot to talk about AB5, so I'd be very happy to come and continue the conversation.
You're very kind. Thank you. For Scott Walton of Legendary Uncle Studios, for John Scalia, Madman Across the Water, my chief of staff, Dr. Mike Zima, of course, my special guest, Karen Anderson, Freelancers Against AB5, theworkcompcentral.com, and A1 Law. My name is Steve Appell. We'll see you again tomorrow at noon for another edition of Work Comp Matters.